Before we dive into this explosive story of what happens when bullies pick the wrong fight, I need you to absolutely smash that like button right now. What you're about to witness is the moment when humanity stopped playing nice and reminded the galaxy why you never, ever demand that humans prove their strength. Drop a comment below and tell me the exact moment you knew the hegemony had made a fatal mistake. Trust me, you'll know when it happens. The crystalline chamber of the Galactic Federation Council had witnessed countless diplomatic crises over its 3,000-year history, but never had the air itself seemed to vibrate with such barely contained violence. High Admiral Zektar of the Corvan hegemony stood at the speaker's podium, his 7-foot frame encased in ceremonial battle armor that had been worn during the conquest of 17 star systems. His 4 arms gestured with practiced, theatrical menace as he addressed the assembled representatives of 43 galactic civilizations. Where other species had representatives, the hegemony had conquerors. Where others had diplomats, they had war leaders. And where others sought negotiation, they demanded submission. Esteemed members of this council, Zektar's voice dripped with contempt as he spoke the word, his translation matrix converting his chittering, multitonal speech into the common galactic tongue. We gathered today to address the continued presence of an unproven species in our midst. The humans of Sol 3 have enjoyed Federation provisional membership for 12 standard rotations without demonstrating their worthiness to stand among true civilizations. A ripple of nervous energy passed through the chamber. The Corvan hegemony's recent expansion had been brutal and swift. 12 systems had fallen to their fleets in the past 5 years, each conquest following the same pattern, a challenge to prove strength, followed by immediate annihilation when that strength was deemed insufficient. Counselor Vexhai of the Ethereal Collective, his translucent form shimmering with anxiety, raised a tentacled appendage. Admiral Zektar, the humans have contributed significantly to galactic science, trade, and diplomatic silence. Zektar's roar echoed through the chamber, his mandibles spreading wide in a display of aggression that sent several smaller species representatives cowering behind their protective barriers. Science, trade, diplomacy? These are the tools of the weak, the refuge of species too cowardly to face the crucible of true strength. He turned his 6 compound eyes toward the human delegation seated in the modest section reserved for provisional members. Ambassador Elena Santa sat calmly, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. Beside her, General Marcus Stone remained equally composed, though those who knew him well might have noticed the slight tightening around his eyes. The humans, Zektar continued, his voice dropping to a menacing growl, have hidden behind their reputation as peaceful traders and innovative scientists for far too long. But peace is merely war delayed, and innovation without the strength to defend it is meaningless. The hegemony formally challenges Earth to demonstrate their military capability within 72 standard hours. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species began speaking at once, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the translation system struggled to process. Some protested the legality of such a challenge, others demanded mediation, and still others began calculating the political implications of what was essentially a death sentence. Through it all, Ambassador Santos remained perfectly still. Zektar raised his primary arms for silence, and the chamber gradually quieted. The terms are simple. Earth will assemble their finest military vessels and demonstrate their capability in orbital display above Sol 3. If their strength proves adequate, they may continue their provisional membership. If not, he let the threat hang in the air like a sword over every head in the chamber. The hegemony fleet will ensure that no trace of their inadequacy remains to embarrass this council. Several representatives gasped. The Drakari delegate, a reptilian being known for his usual composure, actually hissed in shock. The challenge wasn't just about membership, it was about survival. Ambassador Santos finally stood, her movement so calm and deliberate that it drew every eye in the chamber. When she spoke, her voice carried no fear, no anger, only a crystalline clarity that cut through the lingering tension like a blade. The United Earth Federation accepts your challenge, Admiral Zektar. The silence that followed was deafening. Zektar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Excellent. 72 hours. To try to make it entertaining. As the hegemony delegation filed out of the chamber, Councillor Vexhai approached the human delegation with obvious distress. Ambassador Santos, surely there must be another way. The hegemony fleet numbers over 500 vessels. They have conquered species with military traditions spanning millennia. This is suicide. Santos turned to face the ethereal representative, and for just a moment, Vexhai caught something in her eyes that made his translucent form shiver. It wasn't fear. It wasn't desperation. It was anticipation. Counselor, she said quietly, there's something you should understand about humanity. We've never been particularly good at giving bullies what they expect. The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council convened within 3 hours of the Galactic Federation Challenge, the most rapid response in the organization's history. President Maria Chun presided over a room filled with tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Around the polished table sat the most powerful leaders on Earth, along with several figures whose presence was not publicly acknowledged. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, President Chun said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the crisis. A hostile alien empire has essentially declared war on Earth unless we can prove our military strength meets their standards. And we have 72 hours. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, Supreme Commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces, leaned forward. At 52, she had the kind of calm competence that came from 30 years of preparing for scenarios that everyone hoped would never occur. Her silver-streaked black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dark eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had looked into the abyss and found it wanting. That's correct, Madam President. However, I believe there are several key factors that Admiral Zektar and his hegemony have failed to consider, such as, asked Secretary of Defense Robert Park, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. Rodriguez activated the holographic display in the center of the room. The image that appeared was stunning, a real-time view of the outer Sol system, showing the steady arrival of hegemony warships. Already, over 200 vessels had taken position. Beyond Pluto's orbit, their wedge-shaped forms bristling with weapons that could crack a moon. First, Rodriguez said, highlighting several of the alien ships, they believe they're dealing with a primitive, barely spacefaring civilization. Our public presence in space consists mainly of research stations, trade vessels, and what appear to be lightly armed patrol craft. Appear to be? Chen asked, though there was something in her tone that suggested she already suspected the answer. Second, Rodriguez continued, they've made their assessment based on our deliberately limited public military presence. The hegemony has no idea about Project Prometheus, the deep space defense grid, or our actual fleet composition. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show what appeared to be a simple asteroid belt. Then the view enhanced, revealing massive installations built into and around the asteroids, their surfaces bristling with weapon systems that dwarfed anything the hegemony had brought to the system. Third, Rodriguez's voice took on a note of grim satisfaction. They've challenged us to a demonstration of strength. They haven't asked for surrender, negotiation, or compromise. They've specifically requested that we show them what we're capable of. The implications hung in the air as the world's most powerful leaders processed what they were seeing. Director James Morrison of the Global Intelligence Coordination Office spoke up from his position at the far end of the table. His department officially didn't exist, and its actual capabilities were known to fewer than 50 people on Earth. Admiral Rodriguez is correct, Madam President. Our intelligence assets have been monitoring hegemony expansion for the past 18 months. They follow the same pattern every time. Issue a challenge, wait for the target species to assemble their best military assets, then annihilate them in a single overwhelming strike. How many species have they conquered using this method? Chun asked. 12 confirmed. Possibly as many as 16, though some target species were obliterated so completely that we can't verify their existence prior to hegemony contact. President Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying the holographic display and the faces around the table. Finally, she spoke. Admiral Rodriguez, in your professional opinion, what are our chances of survival if we reveal our true capabilities? Against the current hegemony force in our system? 100%, Madam President. Against the retaliation fleet they'll send afterward? Rodriguez paused, her expression growing colder. That depends on how thoroughly we want to end this threat. Explain. Rodriguez stood and walked to the holographic display. With a gesture, she called up a galaxy-wide map showing hegemony territory, Federation space, and the dozens of systems that had fallen under Corvin control in recent years. The hegemony has built their expansion on a foundation of fear and the illusion of invincibility. They choose targets they believe they can easily defeat, crush them publicly, and use that demonstration to intimidate other potential enemies into submission. It's a brilliant strategy, but it has a critical weakness. She highlighted several systems on the map. Intelligence suggests that at least 6 of their conquered species are actually just waiting for someone to prove that. The hegemony can be beaten. If we not only survive their challenge but decisively defeat their fleet, it could trigger rebellions across their entire empire. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. You're not talking about just defending ourselves, Secretary, Park said slowly. You're talking about starting a galactic war. No, Rodriguez replied, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. I'm talking about ending one. The hegemony has been waging war across the galaxy for years. The only question is whether we let them continue or teach them why picking a fight with humanity was the biggest mistake they've ever made. President Chun studied the faces around the table, reading the mix of fear, determination, and grim acceptance she saw there. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had just made a decision that would reshape the galaxy. Admiral Rodriguez, you have authorization to proceed with whatever demonstration you deem appropriate. But I want to be absolutely clear. The goal is to end this threat permanently. If that means showing the galaxy exactly what happens when someone threatens Earth, so be it. Rodriguez nodded once, sharply. Understood, Madam President. I'll begin by contacting our assets in the outer system. It's time to remind the hegemony that humans didn't crawl to the top of Earth's food chain by being peaceful. Hi, Admiral. Zektar stood on the command deck of the inevitable conquest, the hegemony's most powerful dreadnought, watching the pathetic display of human activity on the tactical displays. 72 hours had passed since his ultimatum, and the humans had managed to assemble what appeared to be their entire military force, approximately 30 vessels of various sizes, clustered in a defensive formation around Earth's moon. Pitiful. He chittered to his second-in-command, Sub-Admiral Verkith. I've seen trade flotillas with more impressive firepower. Perhaps we should simply accept their surrender and be done with this charade. Verkith's mandibles clicked in agreement. The intelligence reports were accurate, Admiral. These humans have focused so heavily on their civilian pursuits that they've neglected the most fundamental aspect of galactic survival, the capacity for violence. The tactical display showed the hegemony fleet in all its terrible glory. 547 warships arranged in a battle formation that had crushed 12 civilizations. At the center, the inevitable conquest stretched nearly 3 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with weapons that could reduce a planet's surface to molten slag in a matter of hours. Open a communication channel to the human fleet, Zektar commanded. Let's see what pathetic justification they offer for this embarrassment. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of what appeared to be the human's flagship. A woman in a simple naval uniform looked directly at him, her expression calm and professional. The translation matrix identified her as Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces. Admiral Zektar, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the void between their fleets. Thank you for attending our demonstration. I hope you'll find it educational. Zektar's compound eyes focused on her image, searching for any sign of fear or desperation. Instead, he found something that disturbed him: confidence. Not the false bravado of a doomed species trying to maintain dignity in their final moments, but the quiet assurance of someone who knew something he didn't. Human, he said, letting contempt color his words, I see 30 of your vessels against more than 500 of ours. Is this truly the best your species can muster? Perhaps you would prefer to surrender now and save us all the inconvenience of demonstrating your inadequacy. Rodriguez's expression didn't change. Actually, Admiral, there's been a misunderstanding. You asked for a demonstration of strength. What you're seeing isn't our fleet. She paused, and Zektar caught something in her eyes that made his carapace prickle with unease. It's our audience. Before Zektar could respond, alarms began blaring. Throughout the inevitable conquest, his tactical officer, a young Corvan named Dektar, was staring at his instruments with an expression of growing horror. Admiral, Dektar's voice cracked with disbelief, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. They're everywhere. The tactical display exploded with new contacts. What had moments before appeared to be empty space now revealed itself to be a carefully orchestrated ambush of staggering proportions. Ships decloaked around the hegemony fleet, not dozens, but hundreds. Massive battle stations that had masqueraded as asteroids suddenly powered up weapon systems that made the inevitable conquest's armament look primitive by comparison, but most shocking of all were the installations. Every research station, every mining platform, every seemingly innocent piece of human infrastructure throughout the Sol system suddenly revealed its true nature. Hidden weapon batteries emerged from camouflaged positions. Space elevators that had appeared to be purely civilian constructs unfolded into orbital defense platforms. Even the modest space stations orbiting Earth's outer planets transformed before their eyes into military strongholds that bristled with firepower. By the eternal dark, Verkith whispered, how did we miss this? On the main screen, Admiral Rodriguez's expression remained perfectly calm. You missed it, Admiral Zektar, because you made the same mistake that every aggressor makes when they face humanity. You assumed that because we chose peace, we were incapable of war. Zektar found his voice, though it came out as a strangled rasp. This is impossible. Our intelligence networks are the most sophisticated in the galaxy. We've been monitoring your system for months. Yes, you have, Rodriguez agreed. And we've been monitoring your intelligence networks for years. Did you really think a species capable of interstellar travel would be naive enough to believe that no one was watching? Every probe you sent, every deep space scan, Every intelligence asset you thought you had in our system, we knew about them all. The tactical display continued to update as more and more hidden human assets revealed themselves. The hegemony fleet, which had entered the system with absolute confidence in their overwhelming superiority, now found themselves surrounded by a force that outnumbered them 3-1. You wanted a show of strength, Rodriguez continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. Very well. Let me explain what you're looking at. The display on the main screen changed, showing detailed schematics of human vessels and installations. Those research stations you dismissed? Each one is capable of manufacturing 100 combat drones per hour and has been doing so since your fleet entered our system 3 days ago. Those mining platforms? They've been converting asteroids into kinetic bombardment weapons targeted at your fleet. Those trade vessels you sneered at? Each one is carrying enough antimatter to crack a moon. Zektar's mandibles were trembling now, a sign of extreme distress among his species. But your public records show no evidence of military development. On this scale, your Federation reports list Earth as having minimal defensive capabilities. Rodriguez's smile was cold enough to freeze methane. Admiral, what makes you think we tell the Federation everything? We learned very early in our galactic interactions that the universe is full of species who mistake kindness for weakness. So we made a decision. We would pursue peace and cooperation openly while ensuring that anyone who threatened that peace would face consequences they couldn't imagine. She gestured, and the tactical display zoomed in on several hegemony vessels. For instance, right now, nanoscale infiltration drones launched 3 days ago are already aboard 60% of your ships. They've been mapping your systems, copying your data, and preparing to disable your vessels on command. Your supposedly impenetrable armor. We've been analyzing samples for months. Your shield technology? We reverse-engineered it from debris left behind by your conquest of the Drakari system. The blood drained from Zektar's face as the full scope of the trap became clear. You've been preparing for this. We've been preparing for you, Rodriguez corrected. The moment your species began its expansion, we identified you as a threat. Not to us specifically, but to the principle of peaceful coexistence that we value. So we watched. We learned. We prepared. Hey there, Space Warriors. I know this is getting absolutely insane, but if your jaw isn't on the floor yet, just wait. We're about to witness what happens when bullies pick the wrong species to mess with. Smash that like button if you're ready to see humanity remind the galaxy why we're the apex predators of our planet. Her expression grew deadly serious. You made one crucial error in your assessment of humanity, Admiral. You assumed that because we prefer peace, we're unprepared for war. In reality, it's the opposite. We prefer peace precisely because we know what we're capable of when that peace is threatened. Zektar's voice came out as barely a whisper. What? What do you want? What do I want? Rodriguez leaned forward, her eyes boring into his through the screen. You came to our system, threatened our world, and demanded that we prove ourselves worthy of existence. You wanted a demonstration of strength. The tactical display shifted again, showing the hegemony fleet now completely surrounded by human forces. Energy readings spiked across the board as thousands of weapon systems powered up simultaneously. Consider this your demonstration. The first volley from the human fleet lit up space like a newborn star. But this wasn't the crude, overwhelming bombardment that the hegemony expected. Instead, it was a precisely orchestrated symphony of destruction that demonstrated not just overwhelming firepower, but a level of tactical sophistication that left the Corvan commanders speechless. Kinetic projectiles that had been accelerated to significant fractions of light speed struck hegemony shields with pinpoint accuracy, not to destroy but to overload specific shield generators. Particle beams carved through armor with surgical precision, disabling weapon systems while leaving life support intact. And throughout it all, the infiltration drones that Rodriguez had mentioned began their work, seizing control of hegemony vessels from within and turning their own systems against them. The inevitable. Conquest shuddered as its shields failed and its primary weapon arrays went offline. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out as ship after ship found itself disabled by an enemy that had turned the very concept of warfare into an art form. Impossible, Zektar muttered, staring at the tactical display as his invincible fleet was systematically dismantled. No species can achieve this level of tactical coordination. It violates every principle of space combat doctrine. Your doctrine, Rodriguez replied calmly, even as explosions bloomed across the hegemony formation. You've been fighting wars the same way for centuries, Admiral. Fixed tactics, rigid hierarchies, predictable strategies. Humanity learned warfare on a world where adaptation meant survival and predictability meant death. She gestured to the tactical display where human ships were executing maneuvers that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. Every human ship out there is commanded by someone who has spent years studying not just your tactics, but those of every species you've conquered. We know how you fight because we've made it our business to know. And more importantly, we know how to fight better. The demonstration continued for exactly 17 minutes. When it ended, the hegemony fleet hung dead in space, not destroyed, but utterly neutralized. Every ship had been disabled, their weapons offline, their shields down, their crews alive but helpless. Rodriguez's image filled the main screen of the inevitable conquest once more. Now, Admiral Zektar, let's discuss terms. Zektar could barely speak. His species' pride, their sense of invincibility, their entire worldview had been shattered in less than 20 minutes. Terms? The hegemony will immediately cease all expansion and return sovereignty to every system you've conquered in the past 5 years. Your fleets will withdraw to your original borders and remain there. Any attempt to violate these terms will result in the complete obliteration of your civilization. You cannot enforce such terms across the galaxy. Your fleet is impressive, but Rodriguez's smile was genuinely terrifying. Admiral, what you've seen here today represents approximately 15% of Earth's actual military capability. This system contains our defensive forces. Our offensive capabilities are significantly more extensive. As if to emphasize her point, the tactical display expanded to show the positions of human assets throughout the galaxy. Zektar's compound. Eyes widened in shock as he realized that Earth had been placing vessels and installations in seemingly every system with strategic importance. The network was vast, sophisticated, and had apparently been invisible to hegemony intelligence. How? He whispered. We learned from the best teachers in the galaxy, Rodriguez replied. Your victims. Every species you conquered, every world you destroyed, every culture you obliterated, they all had something valuable to teach us about survival. We listened. We learned. And we remembered. She leaned back in her chair, her expression becoming almost conversational. The Drukari taught us about shield harmonics. The ethereals showed us how to bend light around our ships. The Vorthik shared their knowledge of quantum computation before you exterminated them. Dozens of species, all contributing to humanity's education in the art of war. The full scope of what had happened was beginning to dawn on Zektar. You've been preparing for this since we first entered galactic politics. We've been preparing for this since we first learned that the galaxy contains species like yours, Rodriguez corrected. Bullies, conquerors, species that believe strength gives them the right to destroy others. She stood, and somehow the simple action carried more menace than all of Zektar's theatrical posturing had managed. But here's what you need to understand, Admiral. Humanity didn't reach the top of our world's food chain by being the strongest, or the fastest, or the most aggressive. We did it by being the most adaptable, the most persistent, and the most creative when it comes to solving problems. The screen behind her shifted to show images from across hegemony space worlds in rebellion, fleets defecting, the entire empire beginning to crumble as news of their defeat spread. And right now, Admiral, you are our problem. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council convened 12 hours after the Battle of Seoul. Though battle was perhaps too generous a term for what had been a one-sided demonstration of human military superiority. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy struggled to process what they had witnessed. Counselor Vexhai of the Ethereal Collective floated at his designated position, his translucent form flickering, with the rapid color changes that indicated extreme emotional distress. Around him, delegates from 43 species engaged in hushed conversations, their various forms of communication creating a low buzz that the translation systems rendered as a constant murmur of disbelief and fear. Order! Order! The Council's chief arbiter, an ancient being known as the Eternal Judge, called for silence. Its crystalline form pulsed with authority as the chamber gradually quieted. We convene this emergency session to address the recent developments in the Sol system. The main display activated, showing recorded footage of the human fleet's destruction of the hegemony forces. Even in replay, the systematic precision of the assault was breathtaking. Representatives who had been dismissive of human capabilities just days before now watched in silence as their assumptions were methodically destroyed along with Admiral Zektar's fleet. The chair recognizes Ambassador Santos of Earth, the Eternal Judge announced. Elena Santos rose from the human delegation's position, but she was no longer alone. Standing beside her was Admiral Rodriguez, still wearing her military uniform, her presence a stark reminder of what they had all just witnessed. When Santos spoke, her voice carried a new authority that no one in the chamber was prepared to challenge. Honored counselors, she began, I stand before you not just as Earth's ambassador, but as the representative of a species that has just been forced to reveal capabilities we had hoped to keep private. She gestured to the display where images of the disabled hegemony fleet continued to play. 3 days ago, the Corvan hegemony demanded that humanity prove our strength or face annihilation. They got their demonstration. But more importantly, you all got a glimpse of what we've been building while you debated and deliberated. A nervous rustle passed through the chamber. The counselor from the Aquarian Republic, a species that had always prided itself on its naval superiority, leaned forward. Ambassador Santos, the capabilities displayed by your fleet, they far exceed anything we believed possible for a species of your age. Age is irrelevant, Admiral Rodriguez interjected, stepping forward. What matters is experience. And humanity has been gaining experience in warfare for our entire existence. We fought wars with sticks and stones, with steel and gunpowder, with chemicals and radiation, and with nuclear fire. We've waged war on land, on sea, in the air, and in space. War isn't something we learned from other species. It's something we've been perfecting for millennia. The Drakari representative, a massive reptilian being whose species had been among the hegemony's early victims, spoke up. But your public records indicated minimal military development. How were you able to conceal such extensive capabilities? Santos smiled, though there was little warmth in it. Because we learned very early that in a galaxy full of aggressive species, The best defense is to be underestimated. Our research stations researched weapons technology. Our trade vessels carried military intelligence. Our diplomatic missions were reconnaissance operations. She activated a holographic display that showed the true extent of human presence throughout Federation space. What had appeared to be a modest network of civilian outposts was revealed to be a comprehensive intelligence and logistics network that spanned dozens of systems. For the past decade, we've been watching, learning, and preparing. Every conflict, every conquest, every act of aggression, we studied it all. We identified threats, developed countermeasures, and positioned assets to respond to any species that might threaten peaceful coexistence. The implications were staggering. Several representatives began speaking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, anger, and confusion. Silence. The Eternal Judge commanded, its crystalline form pulsing with authority. The chair recognizes High Admiral Zektar of the Corvin Hegemony. A hush fell over the chamber as Zektar entered, flanked by Federation security forces. The proud warrior who had issued ultimatums just days before was a broken figure, his ceremonial armor replaced by simple prisoner's garments, his mandibles trembling with barely contained rage and humiliation. "Speak," the Eternal Judge commanded. Zektar's voice came out as a strangled rasp. The hegemony formally requests mediation in our dispute with the human species. The silence that followed was profound. Ambassador Santa stood, her expression carefully neutral. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Admiral. You see, there is no dispute. You declared war on Earth. We accepted, and we won." She turned to address the Council at large. The Corvin hegemony is no longer a threat to galactic peace. Their fleets have been neutralized, their conquered territories are declaring independence, and their government is in complete collapse. The question before this council is not whether to mediate a dispute, but how to handle the aftermath of a war that ended before most of you even realized it had begun. Councillor Vexai's form flickered rapidly. "Ambassador Santos, surely you don't intend to occupy hegemony space? Such an action would violate every principle of Federation law." "Occupy?" Rodriguez laughed, though the sound held no humor. "Counselor, we have no interest in ruling other species. We just want to make sure that no one else follows the hegemony's example." She activated a new display showing real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. Right now, there are 6 species with significant military capabilities that have been watching this situation very carefully. 3 of them have already begun drawing down their expansion plans. The other 3 are still deciding whether humanity represents an opportunity or a threat. The Admiral's expression grew cold. "I want to be very clear about something. Earth's demonstration in our home system was exactly that, a demonstration. It represented a small fraction of our actual capabilities using weapons and tactics we were comfortable revealing. Any species considering testing our resolve should understand that we have resources they haven't seen and methods they can't imagine." The Zephyrian representative, a tall, elegant being with crystalline features, spoke up. "Admiral Rodriguez, are you threatening the Federation?" "Threatening?" Rodriguez considered the question seriously. "No, Counselor. I'm making a promise. Humanity will protect any species that wishes to live in peace. We will defend the principles of voluntary cooperation and mutual respect that the Federation claims to represent. And we will ensure that no species is ever again faced with the choice between submission and extinction." She paused, her gaze sweeping the chamber. "But any species that chooses conquest over cooperation, aggression over diplomacy, will find out exactly why Earth spent so long preparing for this moment." Ambassador Santos stepped forward. The United Earth Federation hereby offers its full military support to any species threatened by conquest or subjugation. We propose the establishment of a new galactic defense initiative with humanity providing security guarantees in exchange for full Federation membership and a voice in galactic governance. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species welcomed the offer, having lived in fear of hegemony expansion for years. Others worried about trading one potential tyrant for another. And a few began calculating how to profit from the new power structure. Through it all, Rodriguez and Santos remained calm, professional, and utterly confident. They had revealed just enough of Earth's capabilities to end the immediate threat while keeping enough hidden to deter future aggression. It was a masterpiece of strategic communication that left every species in the galaxy with the same conclusion. Humanity was not to be underestimated. As the debate raged around them, Zektar finally spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. How did you prepare for this so completely? Rodriguez turned to look at the defeated Admiral, her expression almost pitying. Admiral, you made the same mistake that every aggressor makes. You assumed that because we wanted peace, we wouldn't prepare for war. But humans learned long ago that if you want peace, you prepare for war. If you want to be left alone, you make sure that bothering you is more trouble than it's worth. She stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. And Admiral? Bothering humanity is more trouble than anyone in this galaxy can afford. 6 months after what galactic historians would later call the Soul Demonstration, the galaxy was a very different place. The Corvan hegemony had fractured into 17 separate systems, most of which immediately applied for Federation protection under the new Human Security Guarantee. Species that had spent decades in fear of conquest were suddenly free to pursue their own development without the constant threat of annihilation. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the Hughes Vindicator, humanity's newest and most advanced vessel, watching the construction of the first joint human-alien defense station in what had once been hegemony space. The massive structure was a symbol of the new galactic order protected by human military might, but governed by Federation law and staffed by representatives from dozens of species. Admiral, came a voice behind her. She turned to see Commander Elena Vasquez, her intelligence chief, approaching with a data pad. The weekly threat assessment, ma'am. Rodriguez accepted the pad and quickly scanned its contents. 3 potential aggressive species had backed down from expansion plans after receiving what diplomats politely called educational briefings about human capabilities. 2 others had requested direct diplomatic contact with Earth, apparently hoping to avoid misunderstandings. And 1 species on the far rim had reportedly begun developing weapons, specifically designed to counter human stealth technology. The Kitharan Empire? Rodriguez asked, noting the last entry. Yes, ma'am. Intelligence suggests they're taking our emergence as a personal challenge. They've started calling it the human problem in their internal communications. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Well, Commander, every generation needs to learn the same lesson. The galaxy is a dangerous place, but it's much more dangerous if you make it humanity's problem. She handed the pad back and returned to watching the construction. In the distance, ships from a dozen species worked alongside human vessels, building something new, a future where strength served peace instead of conquering it. Any word from Admiral Zektar? She asked. He's still in Federation custody, ma'am. His requests for repatriation have been denied by his own government. Apparently, the new Corvan leadership considers him an embarrassment to their species. And the other hegemony veterans? Most have requested asylum with various Federation species. A few have joined the new defense initiative as advisors. They seemed genuinely committed to preventing the mistakes that led to their empire's collapse. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. Good. There's nothing more valuable than a former enemy who understands why they lost. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority communication. Rodriguez activated her personal display, and Ambassador Santa's face appeared in holographic form. "Admiral," Santa said, though her expression was troubled, "we have a situation developing in the Outer Rim. The Kithran Empire has just issued a galaxy-wide broadcast challenging Earth to what they're calling a true test of strength." Rodriguez felt that familiar tightening in her chest that meant someone was about to make a very serious mistake. Details? "They claim that our victory over the hegemony was merely the exploitation of inferior tactics by a primitive species, and that humanity has yet to face a proper military force. They're demanding a formal battle between our fleets in neutral space. How many ships are they bringing?" "Intelligence estimates over 800 vessels, including their entire battle fleet. They've been preparing for this challenge for months, apparently convinced that they can succeed where the hegemony failed." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, studying the tactical data that appeared on her display. The Kithran Empire was indeed formidable, an ancient military culture with technology that in some areas exceeded even human capabilities. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful, and their tactics had been refined over millennia of conquest. "Admiral?" Santos prompted. "How do you want to respond?" Rodriguez smiled, and anyone who knew her well would have recognized the expression as deeply dangerous. "Elena, patch me through to Fleet Command. It's time for the galaxy to learn the difference between a demonstration and an actual war." The Battle of Cathara Prime became legend before it was even over, unlike the Sol demonstration, which had been fought in Earth's home system with all the advantages that entailed this engagement. Took place in the deep void between galaxies, in a region of space chosen specifically for its strategic emptiness. The Kithran Empire had selected the location to prevent humanity from using the kind of hidden assets and environmental advantages that had characterized their victory over the hegemony. "Admiral." Rodriguez commanded the human fleet from the bridge of the East Prometheus, a vessel so advanced that its existence had been classified at levels above most government clearances. Around her, a carefully selected force of 97 human ships prepared for what would either be humanity's greatest victory or their first significant defeat since entering galactic politics. "Ma'am," reported Captain James Mitchell from the tactical station, "Kithran fleet has arrived in formation. Confirmed count, 843 vessels, ranging from frigate class to their massive dreadnoughts. They're impressive." Rodriguez studied the tactical display with professional interest. The Kithran ships were works of art as much as weapons of war, sleek, predatory forms that seemed to cut through space itself. Their formation was perfect, a three-dimensional mandala of overlapping fields of fire that had been used to conquer half a dozen galactic sectors over the past millennium. "Open a channel to their flagship," she ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Kithran command vessel. Supreme War Leader Thackerel stood at its center, his imposing 8-foot frame encased in ceremonial battle armor that had been worn by Kithran commanders for over 2,000 years. His species was reptilian, with scales that shifted color. To reflect emotional states right now, they showed the deep gold of absolute confidence. "Human Admiral." Thackerel's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding fleets that could sterilize worlds. "I am Supreme War Leader Thackerel of the Kithran Empire. You stand accused of bringing chaos to galactic order through your reckless destruction of the hegemony. We offer you one opportunity to surrender and submit to proper authority." Rodriguez studied the alien commander with interest. Unlike Admiral Zektar's theatrical bluster, Thackerell radiated genuine competence and absolute certainty in his superiority. This wasn't a bully looking for easy targets. This was a professional military leader who genuinely believed he could defeat humanity in open combat. "War Leader Thackerell," Rodriguez replied calmly, "I appreciate your confidence, but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This isn't going to be a battle." Thackerell's scales shifted to show confusion. "Explain." "You challenged humanity to a true test of strength, assuming that our previous victory was somehow an aberration. But you've made the same error as the hegemony. You've confused tactics with capability. The sole demonstration was designed to end a threat with minimal casualties. What you're about to witness is what happens when humanity stops holding back." Rodriguez gestured, and the tactical display shifted to show not just the human fleet, but their actual positions. What the Kitherans had thought was a standard battle formation was revealed to be something far more sophisticated, a four-dimensional combat deployment that existed partially in normal space and partially in hyperspace, allowing human vessels to attack from angles that conventional physics said shouldn't exist. "Impossible," Thackerell breathed, his scales cycling through colors that indicated shock and disbelief. "No species has mastered trans-dimensional combat deployment." "War Leader," Rodriguez said quietly, "there are a lot of things that no species has done, right up until humanity did them. The human fleet struck without warning, but calling it a strike was inadequate. What happened was more like the universe itself attacking the Kitheran formation. Ships phased in and out of normal space, appearing behind enemy vessels to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing back into hyperspace. Weapons that fired ammunition through folded space-time struck targets from impossible angles. And throughout it all, the human fleet moved with a coordination that suggested their ships were components of a single vast organism rather than individual vessels. The Kitheran response was swift and professional, their formations adapting to meet threats that shouldn't have been able to exist. Their commanders were skilled, their technology advanced, their tactics refined over centuries of successful conquest. Under normal circumstances, they should have been more than capable of defeating a force less than 1/9 their size, but these weren't normal circumstances. "War Leader," Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos of battle as Kitheran ships began disappearing from the tactical display. "Your species has spent 1,000 years perfecting the art of conventional warfare. You've become very good at fighting enemies who follow the same rules you do." A massive Kitheran dreadnought exploded as human forces appeared inside its shields and fired from within its own defensive perimeter. The tactic was so far outside normal combat doctrine that the ship's automated systems had no protocol for responding to it. But humanity learned warfare on a world where following conventional rules meant death. "We don't fight fair, War Leader. We fight to win." The battle lasted exactly 43 minutes. When it ended, the Kitheran fleet was gone, not destroyed, but captured. Every single vessel had been disabled and boarded by human forces, using technology and tactics that existed so far outside conventional understanding that most of the Kitheran crews had surrendered simply to try to comprehend what was happening. To them, War Leader Thackerell found himself standing in the detention bay of the UES Prometheus, still wearing his ceremonial armor, but now flanked by human marines whose equipment was so advanced it seemed like magic. When Admiral Rodriguez entered the bay, his scales had shifted to colors that indicated total psychological shock. "War Leader," Rodriguez said, her tone almost gentle, "I want you to understand something. What you just experienced wasn't humanity's military at full capability. It was our expeditionary force, the ships and personnel we use for operations outside our home territory." She activated a holographic display that showed the true scope of human military development. Hidden bases throughout the galaxy, fleets that existed in parallel dimensions, weapons that operated on principles that most species hadn't even theorized about. The Sol demonstration used 15% of our capabilities. Today's engagement used perhaps 30%. We've been preparing for galactic warfare since before we made first contact. War leader, because we learned very early that the universe is full of species who believe strength gives them the right to dominate others. Thackerell's voice came out as barely a whisper. What? What are you? Rodriguez considered the question seriously. We're the species that evolution designed to be apex predators on a world that tried very hard to kill us. We're the descendants of creatures that survived ice ages, plague, global disasters, and their own tendency toward self-destruction. We're the end result of 4 billion years of violent competition where only the most adaptable, most innovative, and most persistent survived to reproduce. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. We're what happens when a species spends its entire evolutionary history learning that the strong survive and the weak perish, and then discovers that the universe is full of species who never learned that lesson. The war leader's scales cycled through colors rapidly, settling on a pattern that indicated complete submission. What do you want from us? The same thing we wanted from the hegemony. The same thing we want from every species in this galaxy. Peace, real peace, where species develop according to their own choices instead of being forced to serve someone else's vision of order. Rodriguez straightened, her voice taking on a more formal tone. The Kitharan Empire will cease all expansion, return sovereignty to every conquered territory, and submit to Federation oversight of your military development. In exchange, you'll receive the same protection we offer to every peaceful species, the guarantee that no one will threaten your legitimate interests. And if we refuse? Rodriguez's smile was colder than the void between stars. War leader, you just faced one human. Expeditionary force and lost 800 ships without inflicting a single casualty on us. Do you really want to see what happens when we stop treating this as a police action and start treating it as an actual war? The silence that followed was profound. I thought not. 1 year after the Battle of Kithara Prime, the galaxy had settled into what historians would later call the Pax Humana, a period of unprecedented peace enforced by the simple understanding that threatening peaceful species would bring humanity's attention. And humanity's attention was something no one wanted. Ambassador Elena Santos stood in the newly constructed council chambers of New Geneva Station, the massive space installation that had become the de facto capital of the reformed Galactic Federation. Around her, representatives from over 200 species participated in the largest interspecies gathering in galactic history, not because they were forced to, but because they finally could. The vote is unanimous, announced the Eternal Judge, its crystalline form pulsing with satisfaction. The Galactic Peace Accord is hereby ratified, establishing the principle of voluntary cooperation as the foundation of interspecies relations. Cheer went up from the assembled delegates' beings, who had spent their entire lives expecting conquest or subjugation, were celebrating the formal establishment of a system where strength served peace instead of destroying it. Santos smiled as she watched species that had been enemies for millennia working together on mutual projects. The Kitharan delegation was collaborating with former victims of their empire on reconstruction efforts. Hegemony survivors were sharing their military knowledge to help smaller species defend themselves. And throughout it all, human ships patrolled the space lanes, ensuring that the peace they had imposed through strength remained secure. Ambassador Santos, came a familiar voice. She turned to see Admiral Rodriguez approaching, her uniform bearing new insignia that marked her as Supreme Commander of the Galactic Defense Initiative. Admiral, Santos replied with genuine warmth. How are our new allies adjusting to the concept of defensive warfare? Better than expected, Rodriguez said, activating a holographic display that showed deployment statistics across the galaxy. Most species are genuinely enthusiastic about the idea of using their military capabilities to protect rather than conquer. It turns out that most civilizations never actually wanted to be aggressors. They just felt they had to be to survive. Any new threats on the horizon? Rodriguez's expression grew thoughtful. Intelligence has identified 3 species on the outer rim that are still following the old model of expansion through conquest. But the interesting thing is that their own neighbors are requesting our assistance in deterring them. The mere knowledge that humanity exists and will respond to aggression has fundamentally changed the strategic calculus for most of the galaxy. She gestured to another display showing economic and technological development statistics. And the benefits of peace are already becoming obvious. Without the need to dedicate massive resources to military expansion, most species are experiencing unprecedented growth in science, art, and quality of life. Santos nodded approvingly. It's almost like the galaxy works better when species aren't constantly trying to conquer each other. Revolutionary concept, Rodriguez agreed with a slight smile. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority communication. Santos activated her display, and the image that appeared made both women's expressions grow serious. It was Captain Mitchell from Deep Space Reconnaissance, his face tight with urgency. "Ambassador Admiral," he said without preamble, "we've detected something at the edge of the galaxy. Long-range sensors are picking up what appears to be a massive fleet of unknown design moving toward Federation space. Estimated arrival, 6 months." Rodriguez stepped forward. "Size and composition?" "Ma'am, the fleet appears to number in the tens of thousands. The vessels are unlike anything in our databases, completely alien technology, following no known design principles. And Admiral ... Mitchell paused, his expression growing troubled. "They're not responding to any form of communication. Every attempt to make contact has been ignored." Santos and Rodriguez exchanged glances. They had spent the past year establishing peace throughout the galaxy, but both women had always known that the universe was vast and full of unknowns. "Preliminary threat assessment?" Santos asked. Based on their trajectory and formation, they appear to be heading directly for the galactic core. If they maintain current speed and don't alter course, they'll reach the outer Federation systems in approximately 6 months. Rodriguez was already calculating deployment scenarios. "Captain, maintain long-range surveillance and begin detailed analysis of their technology. I want to know everything about these ships, their capabilities, their weaknesses, their intentions." "Understood, Admiral. But ma'am, there's something else. The fleet is traveling in a formation we've seen before, but not from any known galactic species. It matches historical records from the old archives, the formation used by the Devourers before they vanished 3 million years ago." The blood drained from Santos' face. The Devourers were legend, a species so destructive that they had supposedly consumed entire sectors before mysteriously disappearing from galactic history. Most scholars considered them myth, stories told to frighten civilizations into cooperation. Rodriguez's expression remained calm, but Santos could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. "Captain, implement Protocol Omega. I want every human asset in the galaxy on full alert. Begin immediate intelligence gathering on everything we can find about the Devourers from historical records." "Ma'am, are we sure they're actually—" "No," Rodriguez cut him off. "But we didn't survive this long by waiting for certainty. If there's even a chance that something that dangerous is heading for Federation space, we need to be ready." As they communication ended, Santos turned to Rodriguez with concern. "Admiral, if these really are the Devourers, everything we've built here could be at risk." The peace, the cooperation, all of it, Rodriguez nodded grimly. Elena, for the past year, we've been teaching the galaxy that strength can serve peace. Now we may need to teach the universe that when peace is threatened, humanity is prepared to unleash strength that makes our previous demonstrations look like children's games. She activated her command interface, and across the galaxy, human vessels began moving into positions that had been prepared but never used. Deep space installations that had remained hidden even from Federation allies began powering up. And in the depths of space, weapons that existed at the very edge of possibility started their activation sequences. Because if something is coming to threaten our galaxy, Rodriguez continued, her voice carrying the quiet certainty that had made her legendary, they're going to learn the same lesson every other aggressor has learned. Humanity doesn't start fights, but we sure as hell finish them. Hey there, defenders of the galaxy. If you made it this far, you've just witnessed humanity's evolution from apparent underdogs to the guardians of galactic peace. But this story proves something incredible about our species. We don't just win wars. We win them so completely that our enemies become our allies and our strength becomes the foundation for everyone's freedom. The moment that gave me chills was when Admiral Rodriguez told war leader Thackerell that humans learned warfare on a world designed to kill us. That's the moment when you realize that every alien species has been playing checkers, while humanity was mastering four-dimensional chess. But here's what's really mind-blowing. This story shows that true strength isn't about conquest or domination. It's about being so undeniably powerful that you can afford to be peaceful, because everyone knows that threatening that peace will bring consequences they can't imagine. I want to know what moment made your jaw drop. Was it when Earth revealed their hidden fleet? When they fought a battle in multiple dimensions? Or when they turned their greatest enemies into their strongest allies? Drop a comment below and let me know which scene made you realize that humanity isn't just the galaxy's apex predator. We're its protector. And if this story of humanity defending the defenseless didn't make you proud to be human, then you need to check out my next video where we explore what happens when aliens discover that humans don't just fight wars, we make war itself evolve. Click the card here or check out the whole playlist to see more stories about why the universe learned to respect us not despite our strength, but because of how we choose to use it. Until next time, remember sometimes the best way to keep the peace is to be so good at war that nobody wants to find out just how good you really are. See you in the next one. Galactic Peacekeepers.